Hey there, I'm Krista Vance, entrepreneur and operations leader.
And I'm Matt Vance, award-winning author and social innovation researcher. We're your hosts of the Culture Profit Podcast.
Your place for purposeful company culture strategy.
Learn from HR pros, executives, and thought leaders how to prioritize profits by prioritizing people.
This episode is sponsored by Mobrium, the best friend of forward-thinking HR leaders, helping you strengthen your employer reputation as a reflection of your real culture.
Learn more at mobrium.com.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I've got a question for you. How do you systematically engineer a positive and healthy culture that sticks in your company? We're talking with a basketball coach turned author and leadership expert to find out. Let's give a warm welcome to Sean Glaze, the founder of Sticky Cultures. Thanks for joining us, Sean.
Oh, thank you guys so much for inviting me on the podcast. Really looking forward to a good conversation.
Yeah, we are too. So today, a little bit more about Sean. Sean Glaze is a sought-after leadership and workplace culture speaker who gained valuable insights on turning talent into teamwork as a successful basketball coach. He travels around the country to share those actionable lessons. There is a lot of ties that you can make between the sporting world and the business world. We've seen that. Sean's engaging conference leadership keynotes and custom team building programs have helped clients like Cisco, Deere, the CDC, and Emory University to increase collaboration, boost productivity, and build sticky cultures that inspire more profitable teamwork. Sean's books, which he's going to tell us a little bit about today, Rapid Teamwork, What Effective Leaders Do, The 10 Commandments of Winning Teammates, and Staying Coachable, are entertaining parables that accelerate the growth of leaders and teams. So yeah, why don't you dive right into your books and then, tell us a little bit more about you, Sean, and how you've come to be to this situation.
I appreciate the question very much. Yeah, I, as a basketball coach, had no idea that I would be sitting in a chair having this conversation, 25, 30 years later. It was basketball that introduced me to the idea that there are more than two parts to an organization. Every organization's in the talent acquisition business. Again, we won a lot of games when I was coaching ninth grade in JV because I had a pretty talented team. I just didn't realize it at the time. The other part is, you actually invest time and resources in strategic planning. Every organization has strategy. Whether it's basketball, X's and O's, or business, you've got talent and you've got strategy. And that's what I focused on. And man, I thought we had great X's and O's because we won a lot. And then I took over a head coaching job and we had talent enough to do far better than we did. And we really failed. We had 5 wins and 21 losses my very first year as a head coach. That's an 80% failure rate. And I'm guessing there's no leader in the world who's going to survive an 80% failure rate. But my principal was unbelievably encouraging. It was at the end of that season that I realized there's more to success in an organization than just that talent and strategy. And it was the lack of culture, my neglect of what now I spend my time working with organizations to promote and to improve, my kind of neglect of culture that led to us underperforming. And I think that that's kind of the third thing that organizations need to focus on and be that much more intentional about. But the problem is, like when I first realized, connections and camaraderie and all the ideas of, what are going to be our values and expectations and how do you hold people accountable and where are you going to celebrate and how do you build relationships, all those things that ultimately become part of building a great culture, I had been really unconcerned with. I was all left brain. Let's just do the technical stuff. And it's the interpersonal stuff that determines how well the technical stuff is implemented. And so that was kind of the beginning of my journey, probably 20, 25 years ago, to really passionately pursue how do you improve a team and a team's performance by culture. And the books that I wrote were really after I realized from turning around a few programs as a basketball coach, I realized that a lot of those things, as you said, Krista, were absolutely transferable from basketball to business. And how can I take some of those lessons and insights and activities and tactics and help others do what we had done with underperforming programs?
Yeah, that's amazing. I totally love the comparison of the sports world, basketball to business, because so much of that does transfer over to just teamwork and having that winning mindset.
Yeah, and sometimes that's what it takes, is having a huge failure that it helps us be like really motivated to find what does work. And I'm sure you felt that failure pretty good. And you're like, okay, we got to fix this.
And I think that everybody, and again, as you raise kids, you see the same thing in your kids that we experience as adults, and praise validates. We like to hear you're doing a good job, but praise doesn't always inspire you to be better. Sometimes you get complacent. And I was complacent as a ninth and a JV coach because I thought I was doing okay until you're introduced to failure and realize that what got you there and what that wasn't good enough. And I think if praise validates, then pain educates, if you're willing to allow it. And if you're willing to stay coachable and to learn from those lessons and to seek out mentors and insights that you could then apply yourself, you give yourself an opportunity to grow and improve and help those people around you do the same.
Say that again. Praise validates and pain educates.
Absolutely.
Good. I love that.
Yeah, I just wrote that down too. That was powerful.
Really good.
I love that.
So tell us, okay, so we see this kind of transferable sports to the business world. Now tell us a little bit about each of your books.
Yeah, it started off, and the first book has nothing to do with business. It was all, what did I want my players to be able to take in and internalize so that they were leaders instead of just athletes. I wanted to, again, our whole idea was if you build better people, they become better players and better teammates, because we wanted everyone to take on that kind of mantle of leadership. And that was, originally called Fistitude, What Effective Leaders Do. And that's the orange one that you see behind me. Then I became far more intentional because I realized, okay, after turning around a few programs and realizing that we had discovered some things that were successful in helping teams to be better. What are those things that could then transfer? My very first book was Rapid Teamwork. And Rapid Teamwork is how do you take a group and turn them into a higher performing team. And I think that there's 5 areas of culture that leaders need to focus on to build a great team. And I use that cheesy acronym, but a great team is focused upon, where a leader is intentionally focused upon establishing goals and building relationships and setting expectations and having accountability conversations, and then thanking people and recognizing them for their efforts. And when I talk with leaders, when I'm doing coaching with leaders, that's one of the more powerful parts of the kind of content that I put together, because every leader is probably going to be really good in at least 1 or 2 of those areas, but we also sometimes neglect at least 1 or 2 of those. And that's where the opportunity for improvement in our culture is. And so after Rapid Teamwork, I realized, okay, there's something for the leaders, but I'd spent my entire career as a basketball coach, not developing necessarily leaders with myself or my staff, but developing those people that were responsible for the wins, the frontline employees when it comes to business. And what was something that I could share that was relevant, again, basketball to business. And that was every individual can take pride in the impact that their attitude and actions have as a teammate. And I think that you become a winning teammate, which is the second book, when you shift your focus and kind of those internal questions from, what's easy or convenient for me to what does the team need? And we had identified in our programs, here are 10 things that the best teammates did, because our success as a program wasn't always about technical skill or talent. It was about all the interpersonal stuff and the peripheral things involving effort and doing things that, diving on the floor and setting a good screen and doing the play before the play and thinking all those things that weren't necessarily just down to talent or skill or the ability to shoot a ball. And then I realized, okay, what's the one thing that I struggled with after that had done well? And that kind of message to organizational employees to become better teammates. Well, Staying Coachable was my third then book for businesses, and Staying Coachable was really about, with change, with that tendency to become complacent, how do you help people to improve when they don't see the gap between where they are and where they could be? And I realized young as a coach, thankfully, that commanding and consequencing isn't necessarily motivational or very effective. And that if you will shift from commands to being curious and compassionate, you have an opportunity for them to see the gap. And so how do you ask questions that inspire somebody to be more coachable and to, by seeing the gap, to then seek to close the gap themselves? And then the last book that I mentioned, you guys are wonderful for having me on with, is What Effective Leaders Do. And that, I think, kind of closed the system, which is how do you take people who were great teammates, who were coachable, who were then promoted to a position of leadership and help them to be effective. Because what happens in most cases is somebody's a great individual performer and they get promoted to a position as a manager or a leader. And that's a completely different set of skills to lead a team than to be an individual contributor on a team. And what are those things that will help them to be more effective? And there's kind of 4 lessons that are in this book, and that then helps them be more effective and lead to obviously rapid teamwork, to them helping to build a culture. And so that system, that kind of cycle of building a sticky culture was born.
Amazing. Yeah, honestly, I love how you've thought about the different stakeholders in an effective team, from the leaders to the team members, and the behaviors of being coachable, and what effective leaders are doing. Like, those behaviors are critically important. And all of this is kind of in your ecosystem of building these sticky cultures. So why don't you tell us a little bit more of, like, how do you define a sticky culture? This is obviously the culture that we're striving for, a good culture. So what does that look like?
Well, it started off, and this is so interesting, having this conversation, Matt, because the work that you do at Mobrium with, creating reviews for employers, I think that it's really shifting, because it isn't the same workplace that I went into 30 years ago as a teacher, right? It's something where my kids who are now out of college are planning to not stay for 20 or 30 years. They're going to stay for 2 or 3 years sometimes, and then move on after they've accomplished something or gotten the skill for another opportunity. And so as an employer, I think that the idea of a sticky culture is unbelievably valuable, because yes, you want a place where people are going to stick around, where people stick up for each other and they stick to values and all those things that are on the website they can find. But I think even more powerful is if you can build a culture where people feel like you're sticking up for them and you want them to grow and improve. Then when those employees leave, I would tell, coaches a lot of times, recruiting is important, but retention is unbelievably valuable. And if you can recruit the people that are already in your locker room, you have a chance to maintain culture a whole lot more easily than if you're just recruiting and you got new people coming in all the time. The issue is when those new people come in, how do you build that culture? Well, it's by having the people that are already there to kind of be advocates for and to share, here are our values, and these are the behaviors that we believe in. This is how we do things, because culture is nothing more than repeated behaviors. But I think that when we see people wanting to leave, if we've done a great job of providing a wonderful experience where they feel valued and have an opportunity to grow and build relationships and be encouraged and be thanked for, there's that opportunity for them to become a boomerang employee, where they come back and they're able to contribute in a different way later on, once they see that maybe the grass isn't always greener. And I think that that's where organizations that really invest in long-term success, they're not going to focus upon fear or consequences. It's going to how do we build up our people and establish a culture where they can thrive and feel safe in sharing their mistakes and in asking for assistance and in offering ideas for innovation, so that we as an organization continue to grow and benefit from them being advocates even when they leave.
Yeah, I think the boomerang term, I've seen it both sides, and I like what you're saying. And I personally agree with that those sometimes can be your best employees, is the ones who leave and then they come back. Because if someone's wanting to come back, then they've been somewhere else and they'll appreciate what they have even more. And I have seen it on the other side where, an employer's like, oh, you want to leave? Okay, you can leave, but you're never coming back, right? And I think you're exactly right.
Well, again, the translation from basketball to business, and not everybody is an athletic minded individual. So when I'm doing keynotes, I'm very much aware that, at least 30 to 40% of the audience isn't interested in this analogy. So you try and provide stories of family and other stuff in business. But I'm reminded of one of the college coaches that I worked with recently, just kind of being part of their program and sharing with some of their leadership stuff. He was fantastic about maintaining contact with people when he would recruit them and they didn't come to his school. He had hundreds and hundreds of people in his phone that he maintained a really good relationship with, because when it didn't work out somewhere else, they remembered the experience they had with him, and they were that much more willing to come back and consider that school if the other didn't work out. And I think that as leaders and managers, and owners and founders, that's a really powerful lesson to make sure that we are always a safe and inviting landing place for people who are talented teammates.
Yeah, that's so true. Like that psychological safety is critically important, and it's not just about being kind, but taking it a step further, as you're saying, is to build and maintain positive connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is critically important for growth in an individual's career, in a team's performance, in a company's performance. And when those behaviors of kindness and connection
Mm-hmm.
are the social norm, I mean, that's really the heart of culture, is social norms within teams and groups. And I really loved how you said with sticky cultures, like that we stick up for each other, we stick around, stick to it. Like I'm thinking the performance side, the psychological side, the retention side to it as well. When we had spoken last time, you talked a little bit about behaviors, beliefs, awareness.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about how those are related when we're talking about purposeful culture strategy.
Yeah, I think that is such a foundational part of what I do when I work with organizations, whether it's as a speaker to kind of lay the groundwork for some of the tools or tactics that I'm going to share, or in a training, whether it's a team building or otherwise, for people to understand that we're here so that I can hopefully facilitate meaningful experiences. Because when you're trying to change a culture, and I define this for my audiences or the individuals that I work with, those participants, culture is nothing more than the behaviors that are allowed and repeated. So if you want to change a culture, you need to change behaviors. But behaviors, and I learned this as a basketball coach, aren't changed just because you make somebody run extra or you sit them out for a little bit. Behaviors change when beliefs change, and beliefs drive behaviors. So if I wanted a player to be better in their role, I needed to make sure I addressed the beliefs that were underneath the behaviors that you saw. And the way that you change beliefs is hopefully you shift their awareness. And awareness is the thing that we notice in the midst of our experiences. And so even in the book, I'll mention that leaders don't get better because of experience. We've all worked with or for leaders or people who were in a role for years, and they weren't necessarily better because of it. They just had that many years of experience. It wasn't years of improvement. I think that improvement and growth and becoming more effective is a result of awareness. So we need to be more intentional about noticing things in those experiences. And so my job as a facilitator for a team building event, for example, is, how do I provide meaningful challenges and experiences, and then make sure that we debrief those tailored, customized experiences or challenges so that the group can then see what's relevant and meaningful and applicable and actionable for them to apply, because they notice something about how their behavior has been affecting the group in terms of an attitude or an action for somebody that's depending on them or somebody that they're depending on. And how can we be better about addressing one of those 5 areas of culture by being more aware? So I think that you want to, as a leader, even if you're not going to bring in a speaker or facilitator, you want to make sure that you are intentionally designing experiences, conversations, telling stories, giving them activities, so that those experiences provide you an opportunity to emphasize some insight, some takeaway that shifts their awareness, because that awareness is going to be what drives their belief, which drives their behavior, which ultimately becomes your culture. And I think that, that's why I'll say, that's why some people are Catholics or Protestants. That's why some people like crunchy peanut butter and some like that, creamy, smooth stuff. Whatever it is, your experience has informed your awareness and driven the beliefs. And ultimately, if you want to shift the behaviors that become your culture, it really goes back to what are those experiences that you're having. Even in a one-on-one conversation, when you're dealing with somebody on your team, those interactions become experiences that can affect everything else up that ladder.
So I think companies realize this to some extent, but they don't realize it so specifically as what you just laid out. I think so many companies invest in events and things for their employees to do and to get to know each other. But I don't think it's always super purposeful. And I love how you use the words custom and customized and tailored. because that is so important in every type of group you had. Like, so when I was in high school on a tennis team, I did play a little bit of basketball, but with the tennis team, we did team dinners. And, you know, those were really great experiences that helped us get to know our teammates better, which increased our awareness, which led to our behaviors, our beliefs and our behaviors being better. But again, I just don't think this has been like something that people realize when they're investing in these events and experiences. So yeah, I don't know if you have a couple examples that you could share about how you can customize that and get good experiences that lead down that road.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because my most recent blog is specifically about, you know, why is team building important? Because we're all familiar with bad team building experiences that were a waste of time and energy and effort and resources. And you're thinking to yourself in the midst of it, man, why are we going through this stuff? Because it doesn't impact awareness or beliefs or behaviors don't change afterwards.
Right.
And my job when I come into work in an organization is to make sure that their people have a great time over that, you know, half day or full day event. But if all they do is laugh, I've not done my job. I want to make sure that those ha-has become ahas that shift their awareness, that change their behaviors, so they do see behaviors and performance change over time. And I think that a lot of that is because there's a difference in types of team building. And I'll tell a client when I'm having that initial conversation, you know, you're not calling me for recreational team building. You can go out and do a bowling night, or you can do laser tag, or you can do, you know, a pub crawl, or there are a lot of different things you can do that aren't going to necessarily move the meter, that are bonding activities and opportunities.
Right.
But it's not going to be necessarily an engineered and designed opportunity that's going to really change your culture. My job is to have those initial conversations on the front end, to get a survey of information from your people about where your strengths and opportunities lie as a culture with your leadership and their interactions, and put together a set of activities that really are customized and tailored to the needs and the outcomes that you want to produce, so that in the midst of that professionally facilitated experience, they have a great time and they work together and they laugh together. But more importantly, they have things in their back pocket that help them to be better teammates and better leaders afterwards, because it was intentional team building instead of just recreational.
Okay.
That's huge.
So maybe give us a couple examples here. Let's say you have a team that they just don't feel connected and communication is a primary issue. They're not sharing enough information, and processes are slow. They're like kind enough to people, to each other, but like what type of experience would you engineer to help a team increase their communication?
I think that opening up in an event, because probably half of the events that I've had over the last couple of years are really focused upon, you know, we've got a group that has been hybrid or remote, or we're bringing them together for our company retreat, and we need to focus specifically on, as you said, Matt, improving collaboration across the organization. We've got information here, but it's not getting there, and people aren't asking for or sharing information that would make things that much more, you know, productive for the team. And I think that, as I'll share in those events, you know, collaboration is something that occurs on a foundation of a trusted relationship. I'm not going to admit a mistake or to ask for help if I don't know that I can trust you with knowing that I was vulnerable, and you're not pointing at and laughing, but the idea of, are you going to be that much more willing to assist, or willing to help, or willing to allow me to be vulnerable in that moment, to ask for help, to share an idea, et cetera. So collaboration depends upon a trusted relationship. And so part of every event is going to be, how do you help people to build some of those relationships and to get to know people that they didn't know before, to build a little bit more of an understanding, so they tell a better story about Susie, and they tell themselves a different story about Tom, because they've had a chance to interact and learn a little bit more about them as a person. And once you understand somebody's story, it's a whole lot easier to understand why they're doing what they're doing on Zoom or in email, et cetera. And you stop kind of reading tone into some of those emails, maybe, that otherwise would have kind of, you know, sabotaged how you're reading the message that they're sending you. And so a lot of that tailored program is going to be based upon, how do you build some of those conversations in, how do you make them aware through a couple of challenges of the assumptions they're making about the person that they're depending on, or the person that is depending on them, so that they don't tell themselves false stories that sabotage productive conversations. And then at the end, how do you give them an opportunity to take advantage of the relationships and the familiarity they've built, and questioning some of those assumptions, to then as a group be able to overcome a challenge that's going to be a little bit more demanding of them having to communicate and share what they see. And so it really depends upon the organization and what that desired outcome is, that you basically will construct a series of activities or challenges, so that at the end of the day, they've not just had a great time, but they've hopefully had a number of those kind of insights that are in their back pocket, so they're better moving forward.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, Sean, is like, if communication is a primary thing, it's a primary issue, it's really important for people to have a deeper connection with each other and to understand each other a little bit more on a personal level. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to share their whole life story if they're not comfortable sharing certain things, but understanding people's life view a little bit more can help have a more healthy perspective on, hey, we're all different, but we're all here for the same shared goal.
What would make your role easier? What could I do to make your job easier? What are some things that make things more difficult for you that I might not know? There are a series of questions you can ask in the midst of conversations that are focused specifically upon workplace stuff, that don't necessarily have to bring in, as you said, the entire life story. Although I do think that it's helpful to understand personality styles and tendencies, and how that shapes what we assume and how we act, and what we're strongest in terms of our behaviors, especially in a hybrid or a remote situation. But that idea of connection leading to collaboration is a huge part of it. And communication is also shaped by clarity, right? It's not just connection, but how clear are you about expectations? And leaving a meeting, do you make sure that it's a habit that you get in the routine of who's going to do what by when, and that somebody takes accountability for and owns that activity instead of it being vague. And I think that a lot of failure is a result of that vagueness. And if we are clear in communications, then again, that goes back to not making those assumptions. And a lot of that is kind of wrapped into the activities and the debriefing that you would do.
Okay. Yeah. And I know we're getting pretty close to the end of our time, but I thought of one more here.
Yeah.
So let's say you get survey results back and you see that like a lot of comments of employees, managers, frontline employees feeling disconnected from the executive team. That's something that we see in conversations where, like, what do you do to help the executives be more connected with everyone else, and everyone else be more connected with the executives?
I think first, again, awareness shifts beliefs. And a lot of times those executives who are disconnected don't feel it. They assume that they know the things that they're not inquiring about. And a lot of times we don't seek feedback because either we assume we know, or because we don't want to hear what we expect is probably going to be the truth that we don't want to hear. And so as that executive receives that survey feedback that I collect for them, that's an unbelievable, powerful, eye-opening moment for them to be more intentional about having those conversations and going to the front line and asking, hey, what do I not know that I should? Hey, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? What's something that I should be more familiar with? What's an opportunity we're not taking advantage of? Again, all leadership is based upon the questions that you're asking yourself and then the people around you. And if you ask better questions, that's normally going to be a result of getting better information that informs those questions, so you're more aware. And again, awareness is what leaders want to be better. There's only three ways they're going to become more aware. It's through personal reflection, it's through requesting feedback from the people that you have, and it's from hiring a really good coach who's going to ask you the questions that you wouldn't ask yourself. And so if you want to be a more effective leader, it's reflection and feedback and coaching that are going to make that possible.
I love that.
Reflection, feedback, and coaching. Yeah, it's huge. And I think going back to the name of this podcast, the culture profit, everything that's going to come from the executives, the owners of the company, they're looking at their bottom line. They want their employees and team members to be more efficient, better communicators, so that everything is producing more. And in turn, that actually does make employees and team members happier, because they are contributing and they're feeling productive and they're working well, collaborating well with other people. That creates employee happiness.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Study after study showing that investment in what is, again, still called soft skills has an unbelievable impact upon that bottom line that every organization is going to focus on.
Thank you so much, Sean. And for everybody listening, feel free to check out the links in our highlight article. We will link to each of Sean Glaze's books, and as well as
And his
Sticky
website,
Cultures.
Yep,
Yes.
Sticky Cultures. Check it out.
And his LinkedIn. So feel free to follow him and connect, and tune in to us next time. Thanks, Sean.
Matt, Krista, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for tuning in to the Culture Profit Podcast, and for being a part of our journey to prove that putting people first is best for business.
Today's episode was sponsored by Mobrium.
Want to get more employee reviews and streamline your employer reputation? Visit mobrium.com.
Now go find one way to prioritize your people and watch your profits grow.